On this episode, I talked to Kelly Danischewsky from Cocktail Trading Company in London, England. We talk about building a team, finding your identity in this industry, things to find passion about, and why we're all here. Cheers.
Cheers.
Great seeing you. Great having you. Wonderful way to start the day with an XO cocktail.
It's definitely 5 p.m. somewhere.
Yeah. So it's XO, little bit of salt or saline solution, a teaspoon of maple syrup from Canada, and a couple drops of Ango. So it's an old fashioned where I just cut the sugar way down, because I think it's XO kind of shines all on its own. So it's kind of like, hey, let's just nudge or tweak it in a different way, and maple syrup brings out all that oak that's in XO along with the Ango. So I think it works really well.
Yeah,
the salt just adds a little bit of like salted caramel to it.
The salt adds salt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find I prefer using things like maple syrup or agave. There's something about white sugar, it's the same like putting white sugar in coffee.
Yeah.
It just, you taste it and it almost tastes artificial. So using something else, and then when you're taking a spirit like cognac, using just white sugar will just rinse it out.
So I just heard something that like they used to say, once they figured out sugar was bad for you, they said all sugar's the same. It's all bad for you. And recently, a lot of sort of biohackers or like health food people have said that honey and maple syrup, they didn't mention agave, but I can imagine it's probably got a similar thing, are actually not bad for you. Like their positives outweigh or at least equal out the fact that there's sugar in them, whether that's other vitamins in them, or I know maple syrup has got a lot of minerals and things like that in it. So it's an interesting thing, especially when you're using them in cocktails. It's like you want things to have a point. It's like, why are you using lemon? Why are you using lime? There's a reason. If you're just going to use citric acid, then then there's no flavor there. There's just sour. There's like a base, and that can fit a purpose. But like, I think with simple syrup, it went beyond white sugar where people were like, okay, demerara, brown, like what are we using? It adds something. And now it's like great to get to like, I don't know whether to call them natural sugars or like,
I assume so.
Yeah. Things that add a flavor. Like the whole reason agave's in Tommy's Margarita is to add the agave flavor.
Yeah, 100%. I love the Tommy's. It's the same thing with like, everyone wants a reason or a story behind why they used every ingredient, And sometimes ultimately it comes down to, I need some acidity or I need some sugar, but I don't want the flavor. That's the story, then that's the story, not this whole trail down off into, I use this from this one corner shop because when I was a kid, I used to buy my sweets after school there,
I sourced this sugar from a mile away from the distillery. Yeah.
The corner shop.
Okay, well, let's start with, we've already started, but let's start with, how did you end up in this wonderful hospitality world? What was the kind of onus of that, and how was your journey along the way?
I don't have a romantic story with bartending. I did a lot of sports growing up. Did taekwondo for the best part of like 12 to 15 years. Grew up riding horses, just part of the family. And that was my career path, was being in sports. Probably primarily in taekwondo, because horse riding was a thing I did for love and it was part of my family. But taekwondo was the one thing I picked to do from a really young age. But I got greedy and I didn't want to pick one. So I ended up having an accident, fell off a horse, hurt my back. And then the team that I was on for taekwondo found out about it. Then I got dropped from the team because I couldn't compete anymore. And I went through kind of a whirlwind of kind of woe is me and martyred myself a lot. And in my family, for somewhere, there's always been part of my family that run a pub. And so I was 17, 18, started working in the pub because I didn't plan to go to university or to do any extra stuff because I had my path already, and I had that path from about 13, 14 years old. That's what I wanted to do. I hurt myself, and then I kind of lost all sense of who I was as a human, because I was the kid that didn't go to birthday parties because I had training, you know. And then at some point, people forget to invite you because they know the story. Oh, she can't come because she's doing this. I was fine with that. Didn't have anything to do, so I went into a pub and I started pouring pints. And I was always a people person. My grandparents brought me up, so an older generation for me is my realm. You know, that's kind of where I feel most comfortable, because people my age actually intimidate me quite a lot, or the younger generation. I find them quite intimidating, and not in I'm comparing myself to them. I think there's a different version of confidence in how people hold themselves to an older generation. And I think where I grew up with my grandparents, and my granddad was in the music industry, there was so much more open and so much more honesty, because my granddad, like, if your song was bad, they told you. If you were bad at the drums, and he owned a drum shop on Denmark Street, he would tell you, you know. And that was just how it was. And it was like, all right, yeah, fine. But now, if you give someone constructive criticism, there's almost like you're waiting for the, yeah, but this, yeah, but that, yeah, but this. And it's that in-between bit that I find quite intimidating, because I grew up where it's, this isn't okay, this is how we do it. And you're like, absolutely, yes, chef, right away, kind of thing. And it was the same when I first was in bars. With the pubs, you get the old guys that would get to the bar or the pub at a certain time. They'd drop their keys in a bowl, and they already knew what they were having, and they expected it to be there at this time. So as they walked through the door, if a guy was having a pint of Guinness, it needed to be there for a certain amount of time to let it settle. And he would know if it wasn't, you know. So it was regimented like that. And now, I don't know whether it's kind of, there's more free-flowing, there's more opinion, 100%, and people are right to that opinion, but it just, I don't know, it intimidates me a little bit. So an older generation was always my favourite, and being in a pub, and I love listening to stories, you know, it can be about something I know nothing about. It could be about them at work, you know, or something. But I just love listening to how the older generation tell stories and how they communicate, and just like their mannerisms. And started pouring pints, and then I was doing that for a couple of years. And then I decided to sort my life out and go to uni. Because it wasn't that I didn't love being in the pub. I loved being in the pub, and it was really nice. I lived there. I was with my auntie and some of my oldest friends I met there. But there was just something in me said I need to be doing more. You know, I was quite an overachiever when it came to sports, and I kind of felt like I plateaued, and I was just coasting, and it didn't sit well with me. So I think I was at like 20. I decided to go back to college. Had no qualifications at all. I had like a real bad time in the last couple of years of school. Nothing major, I just wasn't interested, because my interest was sports. So I just kind of avoided it. I was very single-minded when it come to what I wanted at that point. And looking back, and I was like, it's kind of dumb. But you live and you learn. Went to college, and I studied. Then I went to uni, did photography. And then whilst I was at uni, I've always been quite a self-sufficient person, so I needed to have a job. Had a full-time job. I started in a pub there, and then within, I think, the first 6 to 8 months, I got to know some of the guys in the bar industry there. And still to this day, my favourite bar that I've ever been to is there. And it was the guys there at Hideout that turned around to me and was like, you should be doing more. You know, you look like you love talking to people, and when someone gets a drink, you're really excited that they're going to enjoy it. And when you put a pint down in front of them, it's almost like they've metaphorically taken their jacket off from work. You know, it's like when you get home, you take your tie off, kind of thing. I really liked that. And then so I started working in cocktail bars, and then ever since then, I just did it. And I don't know. So I think somewhere along the way, I went to Bristol and I started working for the London Cocktail Club. And they've been probably, was a real big turning point for me becoming a cocktail bartender. The training I got was just really inspiring in terms of, but it inspired me in a way, not that it was all about bartending, but it was the approach of how you teach someone, and how you can it could take literally just a couple of sentences to get someone hooked. It's like when you do a tasting and someone's never tried, like if you're doing a Hennessy tasting and someone's never been to that cognac tasting before, for the next 6 weeks to 3 months, you can guarantee that's going to be their favorite thing ever, because they've learned all these cool new stuff. They've learned the history and the stories and little personal touches that they fall in love with, the story, the romance behind it all. And I had that same love for seeing people teach, and I wanted to do that. So from my time in LCC, and then trying little areas, I went into Mayfair and worked in Mayfair for a while, because I'd never done like hotel bar style, like high-end bartending, jigger bartending. I'd never done jigger bartending because it was always free pouring. I did that for a year, and I learned a lot, but I also learned it wasn't for me, because there's a certain degree of separation, whether it's between you and your managers and the rest of the company, or you and your guests, or you and the floor team, or the kitchen team. And I'm a person that I'll get to know everyone in the kitchen, and I'll get to know at what time they want their coffees, their double espressos, or if they need a Red Bull, or I know who doesn't drink Red Bull, but they only drink Diet Coke, or this person can't have sugar. I'll know all of that because that's what I love to do. So when I finally badgered Elliot into giving me a job at CTC, because they never came up that frequently. CTC is a place where you're there and it's your home, you know, until you move on to something that is kind of like your next stepping stone in your journey.
CTC is Cocktail Trading Company.
Yeah, sorry. We love an acronym.
Yep.
I think we're the only one that isn't an acronym. Is murder. And then we've got CTC, RCE, HMSS.
She's speaking of Murder Inc., cocktail bar in London. Yeah.
You get it's a force of habit. What was I saying?
Going to CTC.
Oh yeah, going into the bar with Elliot, who's one of the owners, and I've known him for a while. And you always have, I wouldn't necessarily say an idol, but it was someone that I'd watch him bartend, and I'd feel like I'd never bartended before in my life, just watching him, and that excited me, because that was a learning opportunity for me. And then to be able to work with people that they change menus a couple of times a year. I'd never put menus on it. I've never put drinks on a menu. I'd never had such an integrated part of a company. And the thing that the boys do great is they're very transparent about everything. So for me, that was a learning opportunity on everywhere. It was on back of house. It was how the company ran. It was menu development. It was probably the time after about 8 years of bartending that I finally started to understand my own palate and refine it. Because notoriously, I've got my partner describes it as like an old man that smoked 30 cigarettes a day and drinks, may as well be chewing tobacco and drinking peated whiskey. I'm a very kind of peated, smoked, spirit forward, bitter palate. So that I struggled with a lot of the transitions between how do you make a balanced menu when my palate is that of my great-grandfathers back in Russia, you know, or my grandpa up in out in the US on the film sets, you know. So how do you then work for that? But Elliot gave me the opportunity to understand my own palate and how to work with it, which really excited me. And then somewhere in the mix, he said to me about, you should do some training. And I was like, training on what? I'm still learning. He was like, that's the beauty of it. You have such a love. If you have such a love, and I still believe this, if you have such a love for learning, training someone whilst you're still learning as well is that much more exciting.
I think you also learn a lot when you're training. Because you're forced to think about all the different ways. Like you learned a certain way, but now you have to describe how to do that to somebody else that might learn differently. Mm-hmm. So you have to come up with, you know, an analogy that's a little bit different than the analogy that like clicked for you, or, you know, a way of describing it or a way of relating it or a way of showing it that fits them. And then you learn more about it. You know, I always learn when I'm teaching the most when somebody asks a question that's a little either outside the box or worded in a way that I've not heard before. And then you're forced to think about the subject that, you know, you're teaching on, which you know a lot of, and you have to think about it in a different way and then come back and go, okay, either I know it and this is what you're asking, or I'm going to have to get back to you because no one's ever asked that before.
And I love that. My favorite thing is when someone asks me a question, I was like, I kind of know bits, but I want to get back to you. I think that was the beauty of what I learned. I love learning, and I'm not afraid to say when I don't know. And I know sometimes it seems like a little bit strange where, well, if you're teaching and you don't know the answer, what do you have to teach them? But that's the complete opposite. What it is if you're being educated whilst you're educating someone else,
Yeah.
you're both on a trajectory up. And whilst you're both are going up, the atmosphere around all of that is the thing that I feed off of.
Yeah.
I often tell people when they're just like, oh, like, are you going to do competitions? And I'm just like, I love competitions. I love what they stand for. I love what they do. For me personally, they're not for me. I sit within a bracket and I love being in this bracket where I like to be part of the foundation, whether that was opening a new bar and being part of the opening team, the start of a menu, someone getting behind the bar for the first time and making their first daiquiri or pouring their first shot or even popping their first bottle of beer with a bar blade, you know, or opening their first bottle of wine, that foundation. What I found, and I don't think it's not a universal thing, but I found for me personally when I look into the competition side of things, and I think they're great accolades to have. And when I went through a phase of feeling like I should enter comps because that's going to progress me in a way that is an actual progression, that's going to make me someone that's going to give me a name, I started to forget about the first time I poured a pint, the first time I made a drink, the first daiquiri I made, the first daiquiri challenge I did to have fun, you know. And it's that foundation that I still keep with me, regardless of where on the spectrum of quality a bar is. The first place that I did this will always be the biggest part of me. It was the same as when I decided to do photography. I grew up drawing a lot, and when I went to college, I was set to do illustration and graphic design. And then we just had a photography module, and it was the person that handed me a 35mm camera, and the first picture I took wasn't necessarily the best picture, but it's the one picture I look at that says, cool, this is where it started. It's the same the first time you create your own drink for a menu or for a comp. That first version is never the best, but that's where the start of the magic happens. So that's where I sit within this realm of, I don't think there should be a lot of people like me that says no to comps and want to be part of the foundation. I want there to be a lot of everyone else. You know, the foundations are here, but the building is so much bigger, you know. But that core bit at the beginning, it's like when your birthday is, you know, everyone's like, oh, I weighed this much when I was born, you know. That's where it started, you know. When you first learned to talk, when you took your first steps, your first day at school, all the pictures you have in a photo album. That's where it started, and it's going on. That starting point is still the most magical part for me. So when I realized that was where I sat in, I kind of went through this kind of like little up and down. It's like, well, how do you make a career out of that? And it's simple. It's the people around you. It's the people that are there, you know. It's being able to be like, the industry can be cutthroat, can be beautiful, can be really difficult, mentally, physically, everywhere in between, you know. It's time consuming, and the ability to be able to step behind a bar and make someone's day can take its toll on you. But I'm quite a chameleon as a human when it comes to responding to how other people feel. I can pick up on it pretty quickly. I make the time to get to know who I work with, who I'm training, tailor things around them, you know. If someone gets a little bit flustered, I know how to calm them down. Often it's like, do you need a cup of tea? You know, sometimes that's my trigger. You know, if I get flustered or I'm having a bad day, people know to come up to me. It's like, do you need a cuppa? Do you need a brew? And I was like, yeah, I really do.
That's so English.
I do. I need a cup of tea. You know, some people it's like, do you need to just go outside and have a cigarette, or you look like you might need a shot of tequila or something? For me, it's like cup of tea.
Yeah.
Then they just know. Or they'll, because I'm not also a huge hugger for people. So there's some people that really need a hug, and I had to learn to break down my own barriers with understanding sometimes someone needs a hug, and even though that's not what I need, if they need that from me, I give that to them. And I guess maybe it's a maternal instinct or something, but when I'm training someone that goes beyond just physical bartending or your knowledge, you know, it's you as a human, because helping someone become the best version of themselves behind the bar. And that's pretty much what we all do, you know. You sit behind a bar, you go into a bar, you decide what kind of person you're going to be that day. You feed off of the people that are there, and that determines what kind of version you are that day.
Yeah.
Learning that is a beautiful thing to see. And that's just what I do.
Yeah, the competition thing is not for everyone. I'm afraid of people that compete today, because I kind of made my name through competition and ended up in the role I'm in because of competition. But this were competitions 15. I mean, I started competing 18 years ago. I was, you know, there were the same 8 people in competitions in Toronto every time. And we almost learned from each other because we didn't have, the internet wasn't as strong back then. There, you know, you could get books, but like, who the fuck was this Dale DeGroff guy? And who the fuck were these people like writing these books? Like, we hadn't met them. We didn't know who they were. You
they
know,
were just another
maybe
author.
we had heard of them at some point. Or, you know, after I went to my first Tales of the Cocktail and things like that, then some of these names started to, you know, you put a face to the name finally. You're like, okay, now I know. You hear the story, where they came from, and you're like, okay. But before that, it was like I was learning through competition, because competition forced me to research old cocktails, and I quite enjoyed that side of it. But if you're not going through it that way, I think now you can make a great name for yourself, because there's so much opportunity. Like, every bar and restaurant that opens needs cocktails now. It's mandatory. It'd be like opening a restaurant without appetizers. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You need something there for people to enjoy in a different way than your beer, your wine, or things like that. I mean, there's even breweries that have cocktails. So
I know.
It's crazy.
Good for them.
Right? And so now, if you've made a name for yourself, you can go a long way. So how did you know, make a name for yourself in London, which is such a competitive, amazing, you know, cocktail mecca for the world, going the route you did?
It's not really that deep. I just talk to people. You know, I'm just interested in humans. And LCC, London Cocktail Club, was a really good platform, with the owners being quite well known within the industry, and everyone knew LCC, you know. And when I was at LCC, I felt like the 18-year-old, like, living my best life, you know. I was turning out drinks. It was high volume, doing like cool, like 4-bottle pours, drop pours, cross pours, and all of that things. And it's really good for your internal ego, not like the greater ego, but internally for yourself. It was a really good place to feel confident, and a lot of people would come through. There are so many people that were, I used to work in LCC, and it was an instant talking point. You know, I used to work at Shaftesbury Avenue. I used to work at the original London Cocktail Club in Covent Garden. You know, and then it sparks this story about this night that they had there, and I'd be like, I had a night like that as well. And I would just talk. I just listen to people, and I just talk. And I grew up quite a shy person, but there was something about being behind a bar that just broke that down. It's almost like that meter or two of wood or whatever in between you guys, and that station full of ice and booze that gave you almost like a safety net, that whatever was on that side, you had your separation. So you could just be you behind the bar, you know, and there was a sense of control. And so honestly, I just gave people the time of day. And if I would talk to them, and I'd say yes to things, you know, but like, oh, I'm doing this event, and I'd be like, cool, I'll be there. I just made the time to say hi and remember people. And as much as I can be terrible at remembering names, I'll always remember someone's face, and I'll remember a conversation we've had, whether it's someone telling me that they just got a puppy, or they were about to go on holiday and that I didn't see them for a while, and then they'd come back. And it could have been like 6 months. And they went on holiday 3 months ago, and then I see them 3 months later, and I was like, how was your holiday? I was like, oh, that was ages ago. I was like, yeah, but I remember the last time I saw you, you were telling me you were going, you know. And it's personal. It was the personal details. It wasn't necessarily about like, oh, I'd really like to try this booze, I'd really like to come to your bar, whatever. Just it's always the question of how you doing. They're like, oh yeah, work's great. I was like, no, how are you? You know, how are you doing? Not just how's work, how's the bar, because it's very easy to get. It's very easy to assume that that's what people are asking, because it's a very consuming industry, and it's beautiful in that way, but also it can take its toll, and having that human interaction of how you're doing, how are your kids, how's your dog, how's your wife kind of thing, actually makes a difference.
Yeah. In other industries, that would be called networking. And
yes.
My wife has a quote that she's repeated many times from somebody, and it's, your network is your net worth. And it's, you know, the people you know, the people that know you, that can get you a long way in life.
Yeah, it is. It's very much it's not what you know, it's who you know in a lot of areas. I think it's a little bit more an even playing field when it comes to our industry. There is a big chunk of you get to places because of who you know, but there's also still a really big side that what you know also gets you there. And that's when you start to look at comps, you start to look at people opening bars. And that comes all from pure internal education and knowledge of what you're doing and creativity, you know. And then the other half of it is, I know this guy said a foot in the door, but there is no shame in that, you know, because when it comes to hospitality, who you know and the reason that you've got there because of that person is, guess what? You've been hospitable. They clearly like you. You've had an interaction. You've had a nice time. Ultimately, you've ticked the box of being hospitable. So I think it's very much still an even playing field when it comes to what you know and who you know when it comes to our industry, which I think is really nice.
And so at the end of this cycle, or not the end, but like where we're at today, where are you at today, and what are you doing for them?
My journey is, we're kind of taking a little detour on things at the moment. I've fallen to the hands hurting, back hurting situation with like arthritis, and falling off horses don't really bode well for the long term. So currently I have had to stop making drinks, which hurts the soul a little bit, but it's actually opened me up to doing a lot more training, starting to work on a new menu. And I guess being behind the bar is something that's so familiar and so comfortable for me. I'm in a position right now where I feel less comfortable in general, not in a bad way, but in, I'm not sure what's going to happen down the road. Like, within kind of how long do I not make drinks for? Is that it now? And not having that decision and control over it is really interesting. So I'm just I'm making the most of not having the control over the physical aspects of my bartending and my career, and just giving space to the team around me, you know, and the people that was like, cool, let's do this cool thing, and be like, you know what, I can do that. You know, we can look at other avenues, because bartending tends to be the start, you know, but it doesn't mean that that's all it is.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting place in our industry for the last number of years, and right now that, you know, there's now shows on Netflix about bartending. Like,
Yeah.
We're getting there to where chefs were 15 years ago, where there were no, 20, 25 years ago, there were no celebrity chefs. There were chefs that were famous in like your city maybe, but they weren't known 2 cities over or a country over. And now there are celebrity chefs around the world. And I think we're getting there with our industry, but even without the celebrity side, there's a greater, we don't know where the ceiling is yet for our industry, where it's like,
Yeah.
when I first decided like I wanted this industry, I was like, I don't know, maybe one day I'll own a pub.
I'd love to own a pub,
Yeah, but I still want to.
Because I've never had the desire to, like, but when people ask you, like, well, what's your end goal when it comes to this? Because I'm sure we've all had it where you be behind a bar as a young bartender, and then someone come up to you and is like, you're really good at this. What's your real job? Or what are you studying for? And I was just like, this, my real job. Did the degree, cool, not to do with this, but this is my real job. And we probably all had it multiple times. So like, what's your real job though? But I think now there has been a turning point in the last few years. I think we all hate to talk about it, but post-pandemic was really kind of like, for me, definitely was this is how strong you can see our industry is, fighting back all of like the struggles that so many businesses went through to be able to keep afloat. I know the guys at Cocktail Trading Company, Elliot, literally moved his drum kit into the bar and pretty much lived there and was doing bottled carbonated cocktails, hand sticking the labels and everything, to get through. And coming out the other side, and it took us a bit, I think it took the best part of about a year and maybe a year and a half post-pandemic for us to kind of get back into the swings. But honestly, as soon as London got back on their feet when it come to our industry, and they started doing takeovers and events, it was like we went from silence to like a massive stadium cheer and be like, we're back, baby, And that's such a beautiful thing that post-pandemic, that's when I realized that it's not just a group of people that from the outside it looks cool to bartend, owning a bar's a cool thing, it picks up girls, it picks up boys, everyone loves a bartender, most young bartenders have been there. There's no shame in that, it is cool, it's a very cool industry that we work in, but it is a very real industry, it's a very real career.
Yeah.
And I think that's where currently now it's getting more and more so, because the general consensus of people now, and I see this a lot in Cocktail Trading Co., people are interested in more than just that tastes nice. We put a milk punch on the menu. It's a clarified drink. They're like, what does this mean? And people actually ask questions about it though, which means there's more interest in it as a craft and as a career, which I find incredible.
When I'm training, I like to tell people you should know 3 things about everything on your back bar. And it could be like where it's made, what it tastes like. Could be 2 of those things. Like it doesn't need to be in-depth like analysis, because if somebody's sitting at the bar, they want to know something about it, something about what you put in their drink. And if they know more than those 3 things, you should just shut up and listen.
Yeah,
because they've probably done some research on it and it's a favorite of theirs.
Yeah.
Or they've been to the Isle of Madeira and they've tasted through all these Madeiras, and that's interesting, and you can pick something up from them, because our guest is has all the same access we do to things.
Yeah, they have the internet.
And I've met people that are at big trade shows like BCB in Berlin, and I mean, London Cocktail Week has a lot of consumer events, but like Tales of the Cocktail that come down as consumers. And I was like, wait, you flew here to a trade show meant for bartenders,
and you're not in the trade,
and you don't work in the trade. And he's like, yeah, and I'm going to all these seminars on this and that and the other. And I was like, you, sir, are like the reason we do this. We want that guest to sit at the bar and make drinks for them.
I love those guests. Yeah, I love those guests. It is beautiful to see that we do this, we do what we do, and you're like me. I love looking into classics, researching drinks, doing the DNA map of taking one drink and where it ends up, and all these things. And I feed that a lot into when I'm talking to guests, because information is king when it comes to all of this. Like I learn silly facts about the acidity in a fruit or something like that, just for fun facts, and that plays a part in who I am as someone in hospitality. But when I get a guest that comes in and they ask for anything with like whiskeys, cognacs, they're my area. I love whiskey, I love cognac. And if I get someone that sits at the bar and they were like, oh, that bottle of whiskey up there, can I have a look at it? And I was like, yeah. And it was like, oh, I've seen it, but I've not tried it. I was like, here, have a little taste. And then they just go on this tangent about something, and they were like, oh, I've got this collection, and I've flown over from wherever. And I just sit there and I'm just like, just tell me everything. I should be working, but just tell me your stories, dude. It's like, honestly, because having someone that's as enthusiastic and have a love for the industry like we do, because it is an industry of love. It definitely is an industry of love and passion. And having someone that's not in the industry and has that same love and passion, it's beautiful, It's incredible to see. And it's honestly the reason it takes one person like that to be able to make a whole year worthwhile. We have some tough months, we have some tough years or whatever, but maybe 2 or 3 guests a year will always be the reason why this is why I'm still here. And I still hold that to this day. I still have guests that I've remembered from 5-6 years ago, and I still remember them, and I only met them the one time, but I'm still here, and something will happen, or something reminds me of that conversation. I was like, this is why I'm still here. And it's quite beautiful to be able to have a short but very intimate connection with people. But there be no strings attached to it, there's no false pretenses, there's no trying to get something out of it. And personally, I feel as soon as you in hospitality feel like you have to get something out of your guests other than just them having a nice time, then you're somewhere else. It's a selfless environment to be in, and it comes with a care for other people and just for generally giving people a nice time.
Do you think being in London, there's not the same tipping culture here that there is in North America? Do you think that adds to that selfless hospitality mentality?
Well, interestingly, us within our company with Cocktail Trading Co., Royal Cocktail Exchange, and all of us here, we don't add service charge to anything. And that's a rarity in London. A lot of places, I understand why they do it. It's expensive to have a business in London. And to be able to pay wages in London it's a lot more than your average other place. So I think for us personally, as from personal experience, it does. Because realistically, if there's a big hefty service charge on something, and your bartender or your waiter is going above and beyond, you lose a sense of this is by choice, and this is because I want to do it, not because I'm whacking a 15% service charge on. But I 100% agree with service charge. Honestly, service charge really helps quality of living for us as bartenders. But there is definitely some differences because the culture across the UK it's not the same. It's not a given, It's a choice to put that on there. And so our choice to never include it is a whole different area to live within. And it's one that I prefer personally because we've all fallen into the trap of someone is exceptionally nice and smiley and bubbly all the time, and they're like, I don't trust it, you know. And it may be very cynical, but we're in London.
Yeah, it's 11 a.m. Tone it down.
Literally. But then on the other side, ultimately, they actually just love what they're doing and they're really happy, you know. So for me, and I'm a morning person, so when I'm up, I'm up, you know, and I'm ready for the day. I'm going. So I'm pretty sure some people have looked at me and they're like, I don't trust you. You're too happy as a bartender at 9 a.m. just coming out the gym. I'm just like, it's just me. So I think when it comes to tipping, especially in London, and unfortunately I find fairly cynical when it comes to if someone's happiness, there must be something to counterbalance it. And actually, no, you could just be happy, you know. Us making the choice to not add service charge is the right thing for us. Not necessarily everywhere, because there are places that they don't even look at the bill. They're just like, yeah, cool, whatever. Fine. If that's the transaction that needs to happen, that's the transaction that needs to happen. But the transaction that we encourage, and I've always encouraged, is an interaction with you and your guests throughout, not a stagnant. It should flow like a conversation, like just hanging out, you know. And for that couple of hours there in the bar, they're your pal, you know. And it's always that conversation of, service charge. It's always a little bit of a taboo area when it comes to, we put more money on there because we think you should pay for our service. When ultimately, I do think you can't tell someone else that we give great service. You will think we give great service, and that's it. Everyone's interpretation of great service is different, you know. So whether that's worth 5%, 10%, or some people are still very old school and they'd rather tip in cash. Because you have to remember also, there's been stuff in the papers about some companies that don't give their service charge to their staff. These people all read those papers, you know. And so I don't necessarily believe that someone not paying service charge is because they don't think you've got great service. They might just be sticking it to the man and being like, if it's a big business, you deserve this money, not them.
There was a thing a number of years ago now in Canada, and they passed a law where if there's an automatic gratuity added to a bill, or like it started to come about when credit cards became more prominent than cash. So like you used to be tipped in cash and it was easy. You just did your cash out at the end of the night and the tips were yours and everything went to the bar.
Yeah.
Or everything else went to the bar. But then when credit cards became a thing, if your credit card tip total outweighed what cash was above your float, the bar had to give it to you somehow. Mm-hmm. And as that became more and more a thing, they found that some of your tip out at the end of the night was going to management or ownership. They made it a law in Canada that can't happen anymore. Like if you own the bar, you don't get part of a tip out. You're getting the profit on the drink, the
you already
food,
get
the whatever.
the dividends and profits from the bar already, yeah.
But it was happening at such a prevalent way that they had to actually force a law about it. And I believe it was because somebody complained, or, you know, multiple service industry professionals stepped up to say, why am I paying the owner?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's been quite a big thing, I think, probably throughout the world now.
Yeah.
London has obviously an increased interest in this, mainly because it's expensive to live here. Mm-hmm. Like it is really in any capital, you know. London's a big city. It's an expensive city. And when we fall into the category of it's great to make loads of money or whatever, but our industry is not about being millionaires. If you become a millionaire from the industry, great. Love that for you.
Please let me know how
let me know how you did it. Please let me know how you did it. Send me a TED talk.
Yeah.
And I'll be there for it. But ultimately, if your love is hospitality in the industry, the money, honestly, is as long as I've got somewhere to live and pay my rent, you know, and I can pay my bills, and maybe once or twice a month go and see a pal at another bar, you know, great. Everything else falls within we love doing this, and it's as simple as that. So the tipping situation is very much that we accept that a salary is never going to be incredible. I mean, some people do. This is not. It's not talking about the masses of everything, but generally, when you're looking at small independents and you come outside of a corporately invested bar or like a hotel bar, sacrifices are made.
Yep.
That from experience, I've taken big pay cuts and I've never been happier. I've never been happier to go from a salary in Mayfair to then have a massive pay cut to work in Bethnal Green.
Yeah.
But I couldn't be happier, and ultimately that's what it comes down to, because you could be making a fortune, but with this industry, if you're not happy doing it, it's not worth anything.
Totally. Yeah. I was at a nightclub and making really good money per hour. I had worked it out. I was like, this is great money per hour, but it's a nightclub. It's not, you can't do it 5 days a week, 7 days a week, the way you can 9 to 5. I was like, I make what a lawyer makes an hour, but only for about 3 hours on Friday and Saturday evening. I need to find a way to make that 40 hours a week.
Yeah. And that's just not sustainable.
Still haven't figured that out. But
well, when you do, let me know.
Yeah, but like so you can't do it for the money, because that wasn't sustainable for me, because I eventually reached a point where I just couldn't make another vodka Red Bull. I just had to go. I was competing in competitions. As that club bartender was that weird thing. I was making cocktails in my free time and then making vodka Red Bulls and vodka sodas in my
and popping
work
open
time.
plastic beer bowls.
Yeah. So I was like, I gotta go. And I had to, I remember I cried when I quit that nightclub, because I was like, this was my life for 4 years.
Yeah.
I was like, people had me in their phone as Jordan, like, and then the name of the club. So it was my identity. And then I left to go work obscurely in bars that allowed me to do more hospitality, that allowed me to play with cocktails more, that allowed me to bring out more of myself in the bar, than having the bar be me. And that ultimately led in great places, but man, did it hurt the pocketbook in the short term.
Yeah, of course. Talking about, you said about your identity, I found that really interesting over the last couple of years. I find, because I couldn't pinpoint my own identity within the industry, and I'm okay with that. But I find a lot of people I find a lot of identities tend to be formed by the bar they work in, or this competition, or something else. And I find it really interesting in terms of, at what point did we start identifying ourselves by something or someone else? And this is where, like, when I said about like where I'm at now and these transitions, I find myself having a lot of existential questions, which hurt the brain a little bit in the short term. But I mean, currently, ultimately, it's what I said. Like, where did we get to a point where, because as individuals, we're amazing. We hold conversations really well. We're interesting people. Pretty much anyone that I've met in this industry, be it from brand roles or a bar owner or a 19-year-old kid walking in asking for a job, and then their eyes lighten up with sparkles when they see you bartend, kind of thing. When did then we suddenly decide that, oh, I'm so-and-so from here or from here, and it's never like, hey, I'm me, and I just don't know, like, currently I don't know how I feel about it all, in terms of like us being identified by someone else, something else, or by an achievement of something, because suddenly do we, instead of me being Kelly Danischewsky, am I just Kelly from CTC? Are you now just Hennessy? Or are you Jordan? And it's currently I find it's the same thing. Like, I've had it with fairly new bartenders now. The way they introduce themselves, It's like, hey, I'm so-and-so from this bar. And I'm just like, what's your last name? Because I'm pretty sure your last name is... My last name isn't Cocktail Trading Co. You know, so why would I be Kelly from Cocktail Trading Co? That's not my name. You know, you're not Jordan Hennessy. Be cool, though.
I tried.
Though.
Maurice Hennessy has like 3 daughters. I tried. But alas, no.
I met a Hennessy when I was at BCB. He's from Ireland. He doesn't know if he's a part of the Hennessy family, but his last name's Hennessy, and it's spelled the right way.
Spelled no EY at the end.
No.
Yeah, because there's a line of Irish pubs in the US that's EY at the end. But it's weird because I didn't want to become a brand ambassador. Not that I just didn't think about it. Like I had a plan. I was running some great bars and I was going that way. But yeah, my identity was kind of tied up in each one. Because especially when I got to make the menu, it was my menu. So it was my bar. And it was like, yeah, but there were so many people that made that bar successful, not just me. But now that I work for Hennessy, there's this, sometimes it's weird. Like if I haven't introduced myself as the ambassador for Hennessy, but I'm sitting at the bar and then I want to like compliment them, I don't know how to I get very nervous. Like I'm not, it's like I wasn't trying to hide the fact that I work for Hennessy from you, but I just didn't bring it up, especially if I'm on like vacation or I'm not working or anything. I'm like just at a bar, but I'm like, wow, you make some amazing cocktails here. Like, thank you very much for the hospitality. Sometimes it gets brought up. They're like, well, you sound like you're in the industry. Are you? And I was like, oh yeah, I do this. And then sometimes people think that's a big deal. And I'm just like, I feel weird. I was like, I didn't want to hide it from you.
But you didn't want to be that.
But I didn't want to
be that douche being like, hello, I'm this person.
I didn't want to walk in and be like, I'm this person. Because ultimately it doesn't matter. Like I would hope you'd treat me the same. My wife actually sometimes wants me to tell people, but it's only ever when somebody's being a douche on the other side of the bar where somebody is
I respect that from her.
Doing this. And she's like, tell them what you do. And I'm like, I don't want to tell them what I do. I think we should just go. But it's, the identity thing is, I think it goes back to where we started this conversation today. You talked about just having conversations with people. And I think having conversations in our industry, I think we need to get past the, hi, I'm Kelly from CTC. Like this is what let's go get drinks together. Like that's the amount of people we know in this industry and what you could say beyond what they drink, what they enjoy, and where they've worked, I think would be few and far between for a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%.
And I've been guilty of that as well in the past. But I think it's like we need to get those greater conversations like, oh, so-and-so's married? No idea. Like they have a kid? What? Like all of that stuff. It's like we're so caught up with where we work. Oh, we have fun together. Great. But what's the real? Who's the real Kelly? Who's the real Jordan? Like those things, oftentimes we don't go that deep on because we're so used to not going that deep with guests so often.
Yeah, you're probably actually right. There's a sweet spot with how far you go with the guests and then how much you keep reserved because ultimately they are strangers, you know. Yeah. We'll treat them like friends, but ultimately they are a stranger and you might never see them again. So, and you don't know what kind of person they are. They could be really reserved and not really open with even their closest friends, let alone a stranger, you know. So yeah, maybe we fall into our own trap of being the bartender version of us a lot of the time. And I guess that's natural when you go into a room for an event and it's full of bartenders, right? You know, like, cool, these are my work people. So I'm a bartender here, you know. And so I spent a while trying to just remember that all of these people that I spend time with or I go to an event with, I look at them as like, if I went to this event, would I still be hanging out with you? Most of the time, yes. because let's face it, none of us have a lot of time, personal time, a lot of free time. So if you're going to an event, you kind of want it to be with people that you respect and you actually class them as friends. Working in Bethnal Green is really fortunate that we're a small enough community and bars are really close. So I've got some really close friends that I've met through the bar industry that have become really good personal friends, And as much as we don't get to see each other much unless it's an event, they're still my pals, So, and then when I realized that when you look at your greater circle of friendships, especially when it comes to our industry, 80% of them do exactly the same as you. They're going through the same, like, is this person my friend, is it not? And honestly, I got to a point where outside of bartenders, I questioned if people wanted to be my friend because they can get into a bar and maybe get a free shot, or because they're a cool bartender. Can you come and bartend at my party, And I guess it's the same thing as, do you want to be my friend because I'm a celebrity, Do they want to be your friend because you're a global BA or something, And they can get something out of it.
Yeah, I always thought about that with, like, the quickest way, to be a celebrity, you have to have a skill in some area. You have to be good at footy or another sport, or a good actor, a good musician, whatever. You have to have some sort of skill. There's some luck depending on the career path there. You don't get injured too early as an athlete.
Or your DNA.
You're in the, you're a beautiful person that attracts some eyes. If you're good at acting as well, great. There's a lot of beautiful people that probably make horrible actors, never made it anywhere. But if you want to be a celebrity, at least in your local community, I think the only way to do it that I've come up with is own a bar.
Yeah, I mean,
if you own a bar, genius. You're a celebrity to a certain group. But to your point, they're there for drinks. And so many people, I think, open bars because they're like, oh, my friends will come. It's like, yeah. But how many of those drinks are you giving away and things like that? So I think that's an easy path, but we need to go in a different way.
Unfortunately, it's the same path that even some of us as bartenders fall short on, They decide to go work in a bar that is a top 50 bar or a Michelin star restaurant or whatever in hospitality. And regardless if they like that job or not, or they could hate it, but they stay there because it has an award. It's world renowned. The chef is Michelin star, famous chef, You lose the love of doing this because of that, and then it's like, cool, this is how I get famous, via the other thing.
Yeah.
Which I think sad. I mean, if you need to do that, and that's what you feel like you need to do, absolutely do that. But the people that do that, I tell them, like, do that, but remember, ultimately, it's your choice. It's a love of hospitality that makes you enjoy it, not your environment of where you are, not any award that bar has won. So someone could go and work in a bar that won top 10 in the world 10 years ago and have not even seen the light of day in top 50 or anything for the last 5 years. But because they won that one thing that one time years ago, where the team probably is retired now, they still go there for that one thing. Does it make them happy? Not necessarily. So what is the end goal with that?
Mm-hmm.
So I find people, when it comes to all that stuff, like, very interesting. And I don't know, I think there needs to be a middle ground somewhere, and we have to remember that being famous and popular is really cool, and own a bar if you want to get popular, absolutely. But the long run, you're going to be broke.
Yeah. No, I remember a lot of friends from high school would come see me at bars, like, during my university studies, after that. And,
what did you study at uni?
Film.
Oh.
Film and television production.
Why did you not go into film?
I did. I didn't enjoy it. Like, I was in film. I did some TV, and then I did some advertising. And advertising fit my, like, ADD mind very well, because it's like, sometimes I did one commercial from the concept through execution, through editing in 1 month.
Wow.
And so that fit perfectly.
You went in, yeah.
Whereas like so many films, you know, it will take years to get made, months to get filmed, and then another 6 months to get edited and put out. Then it's got to go to a festival circuit before it goes anywhere. It's like that does not fit my ADD mind. But it was also ultimately the film industry. It's changed a lot now because the cost of production is very low, or lower than it was. Like I went to film school right as digital was coming out. And so it was starting to change, but like to make a film on 35 mil cost a fortune.
Yeah.
So
though.
Yeah, it became such an endeavor that you needed to know people to get in, and like the people I knew were the other students with me. That's not helpful.
Yeah.
It's not helpful knowing the production assistants on every film, you know?
Yeah.
So it's, I didn't want to be 50 before I did my first feature, and I was enjoying the club. I was enjoying bars I was working at. I was enjoying all of those because I was a pinnacle part of a lot of people's evening. There was the DJ, there was me, and there was the people they'd come in with or the people they met that night. And that was key to their enjoyment. So it was like such immediate gratification where I wasn't getting that in my day-to-day in film. Maybe I would have got there, but as I climbed the ladder, but I just loved this. And when I realized I didn't like film, I went full-time bartending because I was bartending on the weekends while working in an advertising agency at the end of it during the week. And I was like, what do I need to go back to school for? Like, what am I going to enjoy? And then during that time of reflection, I realized maybe one day I own a pub, but I just love this.
Do you reckon you'll still open a pub?
Oh, one day I dream about like having a pub one day. Like a pub is just, to me, it's such a comfortable place. Like I've seen old homes converted into pubs, and it's just like that's the epitome of hospitality. It's like you're in my home.
Suddenly you're going to turn your cabin into a pub.
Yeah, it's got more booze at that cabin than most bars I know. So yeah, open invitation. Come to my pub. I took the sign from my bar in Toronto, and it's behind the bar in the basement of the cabin now.
It's a man cave thing to do.
It says for like in pursuit of cocktail excellence, and it's behind like a pub with like a little bar fridge. Speaking of cocktails, I'm out.
Yeah, me too. We have to make another one.
You have a cocktail for us.
Yeah, it's going to make us a little Harvard.
Perfect. Let's do it. Harvard. Cheers. You were saying, as you were making this, about picking a spirit for a reason, or, you know, how do you construct a cocktail? What's your mindset?
Interestingly, it's something I've been spending a lot of time with our newer bartenders with our new menu. Is you can have a lot of cool ideas, and I often say, especially with CDC, that we do a lot of themed menus. You know, there's always a concept behind it, so you start with a concept. It's kind of like when you're looking at, I don't know, a script for a film or writing a book or a story, and you start there. When it comes to the actual spirits, obviously there's a lot behind a menu where you want to make it very cohesive. You want something for everyone. So often a couple of us will sit down and like in management and be like, cool, these are the spirits we want to work with. And then how you take each spirit and apply it to a drink. But often with flavors, and when you taste something and you get a tasting note from it, it's nostalgia. It's reminiscent of something you remember. Maybe something tastes like a candy you had when you were a child, or a smell in your grandma's house, or you were on holiday somewhere and you remember this. And I attach to those things. And that's where the bridge between this is a drink that tastes good, but this is then a drink that tastes good with backbone in terms of a feeling. It's the same thing. So the first drink you put on a menu, the first ever time, you are in love with that drink because it's the first drink you put on a menu. 4 or 5 years down the line, you make that exact same drink, you're like, I could have done something different, you know. You learn along the way profiles of spirits, of liquids, and it's the times where you remember that one training with someone about a liquid and you hear something about that, like whether it's if it's made by a female distiller or it's from here and it has like a heritage to it. It then becomes so much more than just a liquid or a flavor. It becomes a story. And ultimately we're all storytellers, whether it's in the conversation we have with people or through a menu or the way you train someone or like this, you know. And so for me, with being in the booze industry and booze at the heart of what we do, I try to just keep the heart, you know. So, and that, I mean, without booze, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing. We won't be making all of these drinks, you know. And so I think it's really important to remember that these liquids come from somewhere, like we come from somewhere. These bars came from somewhere. They were built from something. And it's that something that really gives it its status, its profile, its story, its stand-up. And so when I pick liquids and I pick spirits for drinks, that's the first thing I have in mind. You know, if I'm doing a drink that is, I don't know, based on, I don't know, a country, you know, the research that goes into it, and then taking something, a piece about that country that I can relate to or an experience that I've had and translating that into flavors is its own journey. And it's a journey that I think should be shown in the liquid itself, from first sip to last sip to the finish on it and everything in between. And if you're going to spend this time picking a liquid and how you work with it, why not showcase it? Every drink's a showcase for the flavors that are in it, and just take that on. So I see every liquid that I choose. So we have Hennessy XO, and the body and the brightness about it, but the richness in it deserves to be celebrated. And every spirit, especially with a heritage so rich as Hennessy, should be celebrated. And as much as 80% of people don't know that heritage, you know, there's a small little kind of hats off to the people that put the time and the effort, you know, into making these liquids, and why we have such a huge profile of things to work with. So I just keep that in mind.
And when so you've mentioned that you have a house vermouth and a house bitters. Mm-hmm. What do you find about making a house bitter or a house vermouth, or just like any manipulating a base product that is already pretty good in its own way into a different way to fit a house? How does that benefit you?
The reason we do a blend of house bitters and house vermouths, mainly it's just, it fits within a palette of seasoning that will work within the style of drinks that we make, you know. As much as people don't realize it, most bars have a certain style of drink, you know. They sit within a flavor profile based on your guests and your consumers that come in. For us, we have such an eclectic mix of industry that come in, tourists, international guests, and then alcohol enthusiasts and things like that. We have such an eclectic, and then just people that just want to go out for a drink, you know, have a cute little date night. And because we are free pouring bars, we do stick to kind of high speed, but turning out drinks within a timely manner, and then being good drinks, good tasty drinks, and well balanced, you know. And these little things that we put in place just allows us to keep up that speed, have consistency throughout, you know, a consistent consistent way of balancing your drinks, especially when it comes to anything that has like an Angostura in it. The house bitters allows you, so if you're ordering a round of classics, there's a structure within how things are balanced, and they're cohesive with each other and they work with each other, rather than having an old fashioned, a Harvard, a Boulevardier, and something else, all stirred down drinks. Having all of them on a table and then being wildly different from each other, even though they sit within a very similar realm of profiles. The house bitters and the house vermouths just allows to have some consistency. Ultimately, it comes down to consistency, whether it's in your classics or your menu drinks. It just allows the flow of palate to be a little bit more in tune with each other. It's not about manipulating the vermouth so it tastes different. Usually it's a salt thing and it's an acidity thing, you know. For us, our house bitters is Angostura based, but adding like a little bit of pimento or pecan and things like that into it just gives it some more body. And we found just made classics more approachable. You know, a lot of people say they'll love an old fashioned, but most people's first old fashioned wasn't in a cocktail bar, you know, so their experience of it, without knowing their experience, we always assume that it's little or some experience, you know, but all you want to make sure you do is make a tasty drink. So with things like these, and we do like blends, gives complexity without it being too far. You know, it's subtle complexities that to the general consumer won't necessarily know. But then if someone like you or I go into a bar, you're like, oh, it's a really good old fashioned.
Yeah.
And it's tiny bits, you know. It's the same as we add salt into our sugar syrup. You know, for balancing, it's just little things, because it's the difference between we can calculate how much salt to add into a sugar syrup, or we're there trying to calculate how many dashes to put in, you know. So as a general rule of thumb, just tiny little tweaks, just honestly for seasoning. It's the same way that you add salt and pepper to food. So that's what we tend to do with the core stuff. So our bitters, our vermouth. But the vermouth it's a vermouth, and we do a seasoning blend with just a little bit of acidity, because that allows us to do things like use a nicer spirit like an XO over a younger spirit, and still get the body out of it and not let it get lost, and still showcase the spirits without it being too spirit forward.
Yeah, is it salt in the simple syrup? I'm wrapping my head around that, and like I think it's, I don't know if it's weird or maybe like asinine that it's been this long before we all realize, like salt or saline solution is in like so many cocktails now. But why did it take us so long to figure out that like an aspect that is in almost every dish at any restaurant you've ever heard of should be in the cocktails too?
Much like sugar is in most cocktails, yeah.
Yeah, like it's, you know, I remember being in a Belvedere vodka competition. That's the competition that led me to this role. And I made a cocktail and I added salt because I thought about all the classic, like the most iconic vodka cocktails. And I went, okay, it's Bloody Mary or Bloody Caesar in Canada. Both have salt though. It's like an olive brine in a martini. Salt.
Salty.
It's like a salty dog. Like these are kind of like quintessential vodka cocktails, and they all had salt. And I was like, all right, I'm going to add salt to a cocktail now. But the fact that it's in almost every cocktail now, or we almost laugh when we hear, oh, I added saline solution.
Couple dashes of saline.
Yeah. But it does make them all better. And it's weird that, you know, cocktails have been around forever, and yet we're still coming up with new things.
New but simple things. That's
Totally.
the thing. Is they're new discoveries.
It's so obvious once we discover it.
But then once you do, you're like, oh. It's almost like we need to remember that we work with flavors very similar to chefs do. So if we look at what chefs are doing, what happens? You need to boost the flavor. You add a bit of salt. you know.
So I always say I learned more from a pastry chef than I ever did from a
I find
proper
pastry chefs
chef.
incredible.
Because a good pastry chef is not making sweet items. They're making balanced items, but they're working with sugar the same way we do. And they're working with, it's like a jigger pour, or at least a proper free pour where you're measuring. It's far more like the pastry department, where a chef is just like, they're measuring through pinches and everything that they're adding to a dish, but it's far more free flow art than it is when you go to the pastry department. Like, there are certain fundamental things you need. You need a bitter, a sweet. You need some things in balance before you can start like screwing around with it.
Yeah.
And that's what I found so much closer to us. And I learned far more from a good pastry chefs than I ever did, a more savory-based chef.
No, I agree. Also, on the side of pinches of salt, it's actually very easy to pick up how much a pinch of salt weighs. Because I know if I do a pinch of salt, it weighs exactly 4.8 grams.
But my pinch would be different than your
pinch.
pinch.
But that's what I'm saying. That my pinch is that. So I know that I can, if I over pinch, it'll be about 5 grams. And then you can pick up on your own things. And I've done so much of that with being in a bar that has a restaurant. And like I said, with the pastry chefs, I've always been fascinated by pastry chefs. When I was in Mayfair, and it was a Japanese place, they were working with wasabi and so many really big, bold flavors to make something essentially that was beautifully sweet and sour and spicy all at the same time. The way that we strive to put flavors together for drinks. But they do it in such a delicate, beautiful way, because drinks you'll sip them, they'll go down. And they have, almost I feel like a lot of, especially stirred down drinks, have a time limit. Temperature plays a big factor into how they taste and how you approach them. Whereas a lot of pastry has a longer time period. So they're making something that needs to be consistently great throughout. And I find it incredible. But they also taught me how to learn how you measure things by eye. So that's where now when I make drinks and I need to make like a salt solution on the fly or something, I'm just there just like, cool, this and this. And I'm like, we didn't measure anything. It's like, I don't need to now. And it's not like pat on the back, well done me. I just spent time homing in on how I prep, because prep ultimately, it's like anything. If your bar isn't set up and prepped well, you're not going to have a smooth running service. If your prep for the week isn't done well, you're going to run out of drinks. And there's one thing we never do is run out of menu drinks ever. And you just home in on those skills. But pastry chefs, they have a whole different level of their skill.
The last bar I worked at, and running the bar and coming up with the cocktail menu and everything, before I went and started with Hennessy, I had an amazing pastry chef there, and like pastry department, like he had 2 people working for him as well. So like any syrup or any tincture I could come up with, I could just give him the recipe and they would duplicate it for me. And so I just like,
we all need one of those.
It opened up, like nowadays, a lot of bars have it worked in like prep time.
Yeah.
Like sometimes there's a person that's only job 40 hours a week is just like making all the ingredients. I had a pastry department, and that was the first time I'd experienced like, oh my God, the level of support. And the best thing was when I left, Mark was like, shout out Mark. He said, Jordan, you want me to lose all these recipes? I was like, that'd be helpful. Thank you very much.
Absolute legend. Absolute G of a human.
Yep.
No, that's great. Good man. So you said, I'm going to ask you a question now. You said that you never thought you were going to be a BA. What happened with that? You said you never thought you'd be a brand ambassador.
I loved competition because competition allowed me to escape into a world of creativity. Like I went to film school. My mother's an artist, like a painter.
Amazing.
And so like I had this creative side, and cocktails allowed me to do that. And so like the storytelling behind competitions and like weaving that web and creating a cocktail where like every ingredient, like it's the corner shop where I bought candies growing up, like all of that. That so intrigued me. Especially because like, as you go on in this industry, it's like, what's the cost of this drink? Can we do it so people will actually buy it? In competition, no one needs to ever buy this drink. It could be $100 a drink. Doesn't matter. As long as it's creative and tastes good. And so I love that freedom side of it. And I was in the final 8 for a Belvedere competition where they were hiring a new global BA because Claire Smith at the time, now Claire Smith Warner, a mentor of mine, whether she likes to hear it or not, she was doing too much for the development of the actual spirit itself, their flavors, everything like that, and PR for them, that she wasn't able to do like the standard BA role of like doing a lot of education. So she needed another global ambassador to help with that.
Yeah.
I lost that competition, and I love Belvedere as a vodka, but my family dog at the time was named Hennessy. I named her.
Oh.
So Hennessy,
It's like a love story.
owning Belvedere,
Yeah.
called me 4 days later, or rather their PR agency called me because they had a role for somebody to travel the U.S. with a pseudo celebrity or like a up and coming celebrity at the time. And the celebrity was supposed to open doors, and they needed a mixologist, quote unquote, to like add content to those doors that were opened. So I got hired to teach people in the U.S. about...
Who was the celebrity?
Takara Jones. She was season 3 of America's Next Top Model, runner-up. She was Tyra Banks' choice to win. She was a plus-size model. She was like the first
So what you were
plus-size
telling me
model.
was your first job in Hennessy was taking a really pretty model around the US.
She took me around the U.S., yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
go girl.
eight cities and teaching people about like how mixable Hennessy was in various different cocktails. And they thankfully liked me enough to do that. But because I was working with a celebrity, my contract was like 10 weeks, but it was more than my salary at the bar as the bar manager of like the hottest bar in Toronto.
Yeah.
And I was in Toronto, there's quite a big tipping culture. So I was making great tips, but it gave me freedom for the first time where it's like I was working 70 hours a week at that bar. I didn't own it. They dangled ownership. That
they
never
always do,
happened.
don't they? Yeah.
But I was having, the new GM had come in, and I was there before the GM. I was their first employee. I built the place. So there was a lot of love attached to that place. And when I saw GM taking it in directions that I didn't enjoy, then like there was this conflict. And I got this contract with Hennessy for 10 weeks that then they loved me and they were trying to find something else for me. I just said, okay. They found something else, and I became the national U.S. ambassador for Hennessy. And it was just, I enjoyed it because I loved educating. I loved making cocktails, but I loved educating. And I would educate consumers through my cocktails that came to my bar where they'd say, oh, that Cosmo was the best thing I'd ever had. Properly made Cosmo is an amazing drink. Pink lemonade with alcohol, awesome. But then they'd say, make me whatever, as long as it contains vodka or something like that. And I'd, of course, not do that. I would make them a gin cocktail.
Yeah.
And then they'd go, oh, this is amazing. What's in it? It's gin. Because that was my opportunity to educate. Of course, if they didn't like it, I would make them whatever else.
Well, yeah.
But what I found working for a brand was I got to flip that on its head. Like I didn't make drinks nearly as often. It went from like 90% drinks, 10% education in the bar to 90% education, 10% drinks. But I loved that education side. I just leaned into that more. And I don't know that I've been with Hennessy 13 years now. I wouldn't have lasted, A, with a brand that I didn't love, or B, with a brand that people knew. Most people don't know what cognac is. So I have this ability to educate on a whole new category for so many people. Like,
I still find it crazy that people still don't know what cognac is.
but well, there's 4 cognac brands that owned over 90% of the cognac category. So, like, imagine there were only 4 gins out there. Who would know what gin was?
I remember.
Do you know what I mean? So if I were a gin ambassador,
now.
yeah, if I were a gin ambassador, would I have been able to do it that long? I don't know, because as a gin ambassador, I think a lot of your job is telling people how your gin is different, like bringing, like
Same, but different,
separating yourself from the pack. Whereas most people, especially in England, understand what gin is, or think they understand what gin is, and then you have to tell them how your gin is different. Whereas, how many people know what cognac is? How many people know cognac's an actual place?
That was really funny, actually. One of my tattoo artists, I was booking a tattoo with them. They were like, "Oh, how's your last year been? I haven't seen him for a while." And I said, "Yeah, I've been like on a bunch of trips." And when I was booking in to see him, just like to have a catch up, and I was like, "Oh, I'll do the week after that we went to Hennessy." And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to cognac." He was like, "What? The booze?" I was like, "No, the place." They were like, "It's a place?" I thought it was just a spirit. And I was just like, "No, it's a place and it's beautiful."
Yeah, exactly. So people don't know. So that kept my interest, because I'm constantly telling people something new. Imagine telling, a group of bartenders about a pivotal spirit in the history of spirits for the first time ever.
Yeah. It's going back to what I said
Yeah.
earlier with a new bartender goes to a tasting. They've never been to like a spirit training, and they hear the stories and the history, and then for the next up to 6 months, that is their favorite thing, and they'll be an unofficial ambassador for that one spirit because they had a training on it.
You hope, anyway. Yeah.
That's what we aim for.
So let me ask you this then. Words of advice for a new bartender.
My main one is it ain't that deep. It's my big one. My big one for a lot of people. It can be emotional. It can be hard work. It can tear you down and pull your confidence, but it's not that deep. Ultimately, at the end of the night, whatever happens during shift, it can be hectic. But as soon as those doors close and it's just you and your team, that's what's important.
All right.
Because it's a team, we're all together.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I just tell people, just don't lose yourself. Don't lose yourself in what you think you should be doing. I've done it. I lost myself in thinking I should enter comps, I should do this, I should want to open a bar, I should want to do these other things. But ultimately, your path in hospitality finds you, and just follow and just say yes. Say yes to whatever within your means you can say yes to. And just be open to talking to people. And just remember, it's not all about you. Genuinely. Yes, we make drinks. We run bars. We do all these things. But ultimately, this ego of, I'm this person, I'm great. None of us are here for ourselves, We're here because of our guests, of being hospitable. It ain't about you.
Yeah.
It's about us. It's about everyone, And just stay open. Because the more you close yourself off from everyone else and feel like you have to prove something, even if it's to yourself or something else, you lose sight of why we're really here.
Yeah.
And just keep learning. Ask every question under the sun.
Yeah, don't be shy about that. I think at some point, as children ask why a lot. And at some point we stop that because we've been scolded or we've been told because it is enough times. And it's like...
I think it's also no one wants to be seen as not knowing enough, So especially if you're in a room with big established bartenders or bar owners or brand ambassadors, and I've had it where I'll go to a bar, hang out, meet a friend there. They're like new to the industry and only just getting to know people. And if I'm in a local bar, these are all my friends around. They're coming up and saying hi, and the person I'm with is like, who's this, who's this, who's this? It can be really intimidating. Don't be intimidated by someone else knowing people. Use it to your advantage, because if you're friends with someone that knows a lot of people,
the network is your net worth.
The network is your net worth. Literally. And that is how it is. And it's very easy to feel intimidated by people. I've done it. I still do it. But there comes a point where you realize it's like, it's not intimidation. It's more admiration than anything else, The difference between being intimidated by someone and being like, they do really cool shit. I would love to do that, but I don't know how to. Can be mistaken for like, oh, they do really cool shit. I'm not within their league. There's no league. We're all, it's all the same thing, like we're all part of the same thing.
Yeah.
We all do the same late nights. We deal with shitty guests. We do the early mornings. We do the prep shifts that we don't like. We all cut a block of ice that by the end of it, you're screaming at the ice, We all do it, We all get home stinking of alcohol and finding passion fruit seeds in places they shouldn't be. After the million porn stars you made for a night. We all do it, Whether you have won 50 million awards or you own your own bar, or you're global BA. We've all done it.
Yeah.
We've all poured those vodka Red Bulls, Jordan.
Yeah. Yes, we have. All right. I'm new to London. I've got a weekend in London. What do I do? Where do I go? What do I drink? What do I eat?
It's a loaded question for London.
Yeah, but okay. Where would you send me?
Okay. So, Dram has just opened up. It's a beautiful bar. So you've got Dram and Wacky Wombats, which are in this local area here in Soho. They've just opened up, which are incredible. Dram is probably the only place that if you can't get served at the bar, you go to a vending machine, and you can get a whiskey soda from a can.
Amazing.
Yeah, beautiful. Food wise, it depends kind of what food you want. Just around the corner from here, at Royal Cocktail Exchange, there is 6 by Nico. That is, it's a tasting menu restaurant, but it's the most reasonably priced, and they change their menu like every 6 to 8 weeks. One of my favourite places. But otherwise, just go to the Toucan and get a pint of Guinness.
Yeah.
That's my vibe.
Brilliant.
Obviously, check out Murder Inc. and the Royal Cocktail Exchange.
Yeah.
And Cocktail Trading Co.
Yeah.
But they're my bars.
Yeah, they're favorites of mine. This is the first time I've been to Royal Cocktail Exchange, but I'll be coming back later this evening. But yeah, CDC and Murder Inc. are favorites.
Yeah, Murder Inc. for when you still want to drink after midnight at the weekend.
I think London is, those bars are, London does a good job of having tiny bars.
You know why?
And they make it, all the buildings are tiny.
Because
and rent is massive.
Can afford.
Yeah. But like it's brilliant in that way because so many people think, oh, I need to have a massive bar. But like when you have a tiny bar, you can really control everything, and you don't need to be everything to all people. You need to be everything to some.
When it comes to bars, especially like if you are solely a cocktail bar, there is such thing as too much space.
Yeah.
Very much so. Because if the space is too large, the atmosphere just floats in the air. It moves. When you take a smaller bar, which we are notorious for having pretty small bars, this close-knit internal atmosphere that you have that bounces off of each wall with each person keeps the bar alive. Mm-hmm. There is such thing about like having so much floor space in a bar. It's just it's empty space that you're trying to fill.
Yeah.
And that empty space often it's just a void.
Yeah.
Those smaller bars tend to fit nicer in such a busy city.
Yeah, they're like a home. You feel like embraced.
It's like a hug.
Well, thank you very much for the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for the cocktail. Cheers.